Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. It took the big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden, 4 days in conjunction with his team to figure out where they were on the Hamas terrorist attack against Israel, the massacre that was committed at the hands of this terrorist organization called Hamas in the Gaza over the weekend, as we all know. They started out with Blinken saying we need a ceasefire, and I'm sure Rob Malley was somewhere, the special envoy to Iran, somewhere in the mix. Took a while to get to we stand with Israel, which is what the big guy said yesterday. But the problem is the Biden administration and the Obama administration before Biden, Joe Obama terms 1 and 2, they spent a lot of time standing with Iran, and they're having a difficult time explaining that. A good example of this yesterday. NSC spokesman John Kirby, who continues to disgrace himself every time he has to flack for this regime, and Brett Baer going back and forth on the enforcement of sanctions against Iran, which, based on their oil exports, haven't really been happening. The enforcement has not really been happening. And the $6 billion in cash for hostages that was reportedly in part used to help Hamas plan this sneak attack. Here's that exchange.
There's a lot of talk about the $6 billion and the American hostage exchange. I heard you also say that it can be frozen at any time. Why isn't this the time to freeze that?
I don't have any policy decisions with respect to that to speak to you today, Brett. I think it's important for people to remember that not a single dinar of those funds has gone into Iran. Not one, not any. Nothing's been allocated out of that fund.
Yeah, John,
and we're going to watch this
block. Money's fungible. You get $6 billion over here for humanitarian and food, so then you can move money someplace else. And then you have the not enforcing sanctions that allows Iran to cash in on its oil around the world.
Brett, with all due respect, I just got to push back on you there. It's not that we're not enforcing sanctions. We have been enforcing them. As a matter of fact, we've added sanctions. We've sanctioned 400 entities in Iran just in the beginning of this administration, let alone the sanctions that came before us. And as for the fungibility, again, that money was never going to be tapped by the Iranian regime. They were never going to see it themselves. It was always going to go to vendors that we approved to go to buy humanitarian assistance and medical and food to get directly to the Iranian people. The regime was never going to see that or feel that, and they haven't asked for it. And the other thing I'll say, Brett, just before we get off this topic,
No, John, I want to just push back on one thing. You said that the sanctions are being enforced. The Iranian exports of oil to China, 2020, $6.6 billion. 2021, $23.1 billion. 2022, $30 billion. So how is that enforcing the sanctions on Iran?
We're mindful that Iranian oil is still on the market, and it is a global market. That,
that's a lot of money, right?
Supply and demand have to be balanced, but I'm telling you that we are enforcing the sanctions, and we're adding sanctions to the regime.
Supply and demand have to be balanced. What a statement. One way to balance supply and demand is to drill domestically, explore for fossil fuels domestically, so you're not going with your tin cup to dictators in Venezuela, Russia,
so you're not reliant on foreign
Iran.
oil.
And by the way, the other matter with the $6 billion, it was going to go to social service providers and charitable organizations. John, do you know how things work in a totalitarian state? I mean, are you serious?
You're not going to give them money and then tell them how to spend it, you idiots. I mean, my God.
For more on this and other matters, Jonathan Greenberg, former Midwest political director at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. He's a writer on Jewish issues and Middle East policy, an ordained rabbi, and advisor to a private charitable family foundation. Now, Jonathan, longtime friend, also ran for state legislature here in Illinois before he wised up. Another choice that Illinoisans could have made, in addition to all of these members of the Hamas caucus that issued this joint statement, like Tony Blinken, calling for a de-escalation and criticizing Israel, talking about Palestinians being denied basic human rights and so on and so forth, to rationalize a terrorist massacre over the weekend. More than a dozen Illinois state legislators, all Dem socialists, of course, and many in the suburbs, not just the city. Amazing. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it included the two guys who represent Skokie, of all places.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, see, I want to get to, I want to get to the cultural response to this too, because of the sort of the feigned surprise from men and women of the left who are pantomiming support for Israel. But before we get there, what Jonathan Kirby had to say about the regime's posture towards the regime in Tehran, and what's been going on for the last decade leading up to this, I just go back to this piece I mentioned before. Leo Leibovitz, writing over at Tablet, he wrote this: "The stage for this attack was not set in or by Israel. It was set by the United States." And he basically is suggesting it was set by the policy of the Obama years and special envoys like Robert Malley, the lead negotiator for the Iran nuclear deal, taking a posture towards Iran that compromised Israel's security.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very critical of both the Obama administration and the Biden administration policy on Iran, policy on Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians, and I think there's a time for this coming. There's going to be a time for a serious investigation of what went wrong in Israeli and American intelligence, that nobody saw this coming, and I know for a fact that nobody saw this coming because my 19-year-old niece was stationed at a base in outside the Gaza border. After 4 weeks of being a soldier, that she had no business being there. The Israelis clearly put her there because they had no idea something was coming. She's safe, thank God. But I am consumed right now with 1,200 dead Israelis as of this morning. At least 150, possibly more, of my brothers and sisters in captivity in Gaza in conditions I don't even want to think about. And the time for all of this stuff will come, and it will come. But there are more immediate concerns right now, and the biggest thing I want to beg your listeners to do is call your members of Congress, call our senators. I don't care if you like them or not. Try to be nice on the phone, and ask them to tell the Biden administration to continue to give Israel time to do whatever it has to do. The only thing that's going to stop Israel from doing what it needs to do is international pressure. And the only people that can take that international pressure off are the Americans. All we have to do is veto anything that comes up to the Security Council. Make sure that the international community gives Israel time to do what it needs to do. We don't need any other American assistance, just that. Please call members of Congress and senators and ask them to give Israel time.
Okay.
That's fair.
That is fair. The hostages, 50 families have been notified that their loved ones are being held hostage by Hamas. 4 of them that we know so far are Americans. We know that a mom and daughter are still unaccounted for that are from Evanston. What is the plan to try and get them out of there, and is there hope that we can get them back alive?
So the hostage situation is especially cruel because, and this has been covered in the Israeli press, I haven't seen it in the American press yet, hostage takers are using the cell phones of the people they've captured to call parents. They look up mom or dad in the cell phone, and then they make these taunting, awful phone calls. The whole point of this is psychological torture against Israelis. We were warned by the institutions of the Jewish community, including our children's schools, to make sure we restrict social media access to our kids because Hamas is going to begin posting execution and torture videos of the hostages. And so we've had to restrict what our kids are able to see over the course of the next several weeks, probably. In terms of getting them back, honestly, what I hear is that the hostages will not be taken into consideration in conducting military operations. And as awful as that sounds, it really is necessary. The goal of this military operation, unlike other military operations, every other military operation against Hamas in the last 10 or 15 years has been conducted to achieve some kind of a quiet, some kind of a status quo. That's not what this is. This is a war of eradication. These are people, there is no peace to be had with these people. There is only time to be bought. And in that time, the enemy grows stronger. And the eventual war of eradication you're going to have to fight gets harder, and more Israeli boys will die. So finally, it looks like Israel has been hit hard enough that they're going to go after Hamas root and branch and which is why I say they need the time to do it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time. But I think that if you're doing that with one arm tied behind your back because you're constantly concerned about where the hostages are, you're gonna hamper yourself militarily. And I think the Israeli army is going to conduct this without regard to where the hostages are, which is horrible. It's a terrible calculation that the Israeli government has to make. But it's also why we don't let terrified parents make these decisions. We have elected leaders who make them.
We should understand Hamas the way that, with respect to Israel, the way that we went after ISIS and Al Qaeda post 9/11 in America. I mean, that's essentially the analog, right?
That's exactly right. All the things that you saw ISIS doing, Hamas landed paragliders in the middle of a rave for peace and opened fire on hundreds of young Israelis and people from other countries who were there to celebrate peace. There were peace activists among them. They don't care. They just want dead Jews. And they opened fire, and they probably 50 of the hostages came, mostly young women from that music festival. And the videos from there are awful, if any of you have seen them. And the hundreds of dead bodies. They went house to house in the communities that surround the Gaza Strip, murdering everybody that they could, hunting Jews in their own homes, murdering men, children, decapitating babies. This is there is no peace to be had with people like this. And the other thing I would just remind people, when they see the devastation in Gaza, and there are going to be innocent civilians who are killed in Gaza, and it's awful, and the devastation you're going to see out of Gaza is awful, but the reason that it's going to exist is because Hamas hides behind those people. If they want to come out and fight like men, let them. But they're not going to. They're going to hide behind little kids. And Israel's not going to let those little kids get in the way. And the moral responsibility for those deaths will fall entirely on Hamas. So when you see things like that, remember, the Hamas military headquarters is in the basement of the hospital in Gaza City. They put it there because they don't think that the Israelis will destroy that hospital. And so far, they've been right.
The sort of now is what now is the time for and what it is not. The cultural response is important too, and I just have to say I want to get your reaction to Jonathan Greenblatt at ADL, and others, Larry Summers, former Harvard University president, also a Jewish gentleman. All call, where are the Fortune 500 CEOs? Where are the university presidents? Where are the BLM chapter heads condemning Hamas? And, but part of my reaction to that is, okay, fair enough. This highlights the reality that bubbles just below the surface when it comes to anti-Semitism and who's captured which institutions in the West, corporate America, universities, and so forth. But my other reaction is, with due respect, ADL, Harvard, Ivy League, isn't this a little contrived? You enabled the BDS movement on campus for the last 30 years. You're willfully blind to bigoted professors. You make alliances with violent Leninists, and then you're going to say, where are they? You know better.
Yeah. So the rule that I apply, I call the Warsaw Ghetto rule, and that is, you're allowed to be wrong, right? Especially people in the Jewish community are wrong on the issue of Israel all the time. And so you're allowed to be wrong. You're even allowed to be painfully wrong. The rule that I apply is, if we were fighting together in the Warsaw Ghetto against the Nazis, do I believe that you would be fighting with me? And would I trust you with my plans? And so someone like a Jonathan Greenblatt, who I think is often wrong and has done everything that you just said, you're absolutely right. Do I believe that in that situation he would be fighting with me? And would I trust him with my plans? Would I trust him in my bunker? And the answer for Jonathan, at least, is yes. For lots of other people, it's no. And, I think those people need to be shamed for what they've done and what they've said. And a lot of them, by the way, realize that it's too late for them to come back. A lot of the Bernie supporters that I follow on Twitter, a lot of the more egregious anti-Israel crowd, they realize that it's too late for them to come back. And so they're doubling down on support for Hamas and for the Palestinian National Movement. And it's disgusting. And I'm assuming you saw the tweet from BLM Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Yeah, so... if anybody didn't see it, it's a We Stand with Palestine, but it's a picture of a person parachuting somewhere. And of course, as I referenced earlier, that music festival was attacked by people from paragliders. So it's a clear reference to people attacking, again, a peace celebration, a rave focused on peace. BLM Chicago is celebrating the deaths of 260 Israeli and other nationalities, kids. These are kids. And many of them were taken hostage, and BLM Chicago is celebrating it. Listen, I think people are telling us who they are right now. People are telling us who they are, and we need to listen.
He is Jonathan Greenberg, former Midwest political director at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a writer on Jewish issues and Middle East policy, ordained rabbi, and now an advisor to a private charitable family foundation. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
120 Life, the natural juice drink that helps lower your blood pressure in just 2 weeks or your money back. Here's another happy customer.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark from San Diego. I just wanted to give a little shout out to 120 Life and tell them how great I think the product is. I've been drinking it for almost 3 years, and it's really helped me with